Connor Hayes adjusted the collar of his formal Earth Federation uniform as he gazed through the panoramic viewport at the swirling gases of the neutral moon below. Unity Nexus, the massive diplomatic space station hosting representatives from over 200 galactic species, rotated majestically in synchronized orbit. After 3 weeks of interstellar travel, he'd finally arrived at what would be his home for the next 6 months. Dr. Hayes. A voice interrupted his thoughts. The diplomatic reception begins in 20 minutes. Ambassador Wilson requested your presence beforehand. Connor turned to face his assistant, a young ensign whose nervous energy reminded him of his own first off-world assignment. Thank you, Ensign Parker. I'll head there now. As he navigated the curved corridors of the diplomatic sector, Connor mentally reviewed his mission parameters. After nearly a decade of territorial skirmishes between humanity and various advanced species, this cultural exchange program represented their best hope for lasting peace. His role, explaining human biology, psychology, and social behaviors to curious alien delegates, seemed straightforward enough. Yet Ambassador Wilson had emphasized repeatedly how easily cultural misunderstandings could reignite tensions. "Ah, Connor," Ambassador Wilson exclaimed as he entered the preparation room. The older man clasped his shoulder firmly. "Our xenobiologist extraordinaire. How was the journey?" "Long, sir, but fascinating. I've never seen so many different species in one place. And they've never seen anything quite like us," Wilson replied, his expression growing serious. "Humans are something of an anomaly in the galactic community. Our emotional expressiveness, our adaptability, our reproductive behaviors. They all find it simultaneously primitive and perplexing." Connor nodded. "That's why I've structured my lecture series to begin with basic physiological systems before progressing to more complex social behaviors." "About that," Wilson lowered his voice. "The Virari delegation has requested special access to your presentations. They're particularly interested in human emotional processing and mating habits." Connor raised an eyebrow. "The Virari? I thought they considered emotions dangerous. Didn't they evolve beyond them centuries ago?" "So they claim. Telepathic, hyperrational, and emotionally suppressed. That's their reputation. But they've shown unusual interest in humans since first contact." Wilson straightened his uniform. "Just be careful. They can read surface thoughts with minimal effort. Keep your mind professional during your presentations." The reception hall bustled with diplomatic activity when they arrived, a kaleidoscope of alien physiologies and communication methods. Connor accepted a glass of iridescent liquid from a hovering service drone and scanned the crowd, cataloging species he'd only previously studied in xenobiology journals. That's when he first saw her. She stood taller than the other Uvarari representatives, nearly 7 feet of slender, graceful form. Her skin was the characteristic violet of her species, but unlike her companions whose skin emitted only the faintest luminescence, hers pulsed subtly with light that shifted in intensity as she conversed with a gelatinous Morbidian diplomat. Her eyes, large and entirely silver without discernible pupils, seemed to catch the starlight flowing through the viewport behind her. "That's senior researcher Alara," Wilson murmured, following Connor's gaze. "Youngest member ever appointed to the Uvarari Scientific Consortium. Brilliant mind, even by their standards." As if sensing their attention, Alara turned, her silver eyes locking onto Connor's. The luminescence beneath her violet skin briefly intensified before returning to its steady glow. Without breaking eye contact, she excused herself from her conversation and glided toward them. "Ambassador Wilson," she said, her voice melodic yet precisely modulated. "I trust the accommodations meet human comfort requirements." "More than adequate, senior researcher," Wilson replied with a diplomatic smile. "May I introduce Dr. Connor Hayes, our xenobiologist who will be conducting the human biology lecture series." Connor extended his hand before remembering the Virari aversion to physical contact. He quickly withdrew it, feeling heat rise to his face. "My apologies, senior researcher. I'm still adjusting to interspecies protocols." To his surprise, Alara extended her own long-fingered hand. "No apology necessary, Dr. Hayes. I have studied human greeting customs. The temporary discomfort of physical contact is worth the cultural understanding gained." When their hands met, Connor felt a strange tingling sensation where their skin touched. For the briefest moment, he had the disorienting impression that something was gently brushing against his thoughts, like fingers skimming the surface of water. Fascinating, Alara said softly, her skin brightening noticeably around her throat and temples. Your emotional response manifests physically through capillary dilation. We call this blushing, correct? A physiological reaction to embarrassment or attraction. Connor withdrew his hand, unsettled by her accurate assessment. You've studied human biology extensively. Your species represents an evolutionary paradox, she replied, her head tilting slightly. Advanced technological capabilities combined with primitive emotional processing. You should have self-destructed centuries ago, yet instead, you've expanded throughout your solar system. Wilson cleared his throat. Dr. Hayes's first lecture begins tomorrow at 0900 hours. The topic is human physiological responses to environmental stimuli. I have already registered, Alara confirmed, her eyes never leaving Connor's face. I am particularly interested in your later sessions on human mating behaviors and pair bonding. Connor shifted uncomfortably. Those are scheduled for next month, after we've established foundational biological concepts. I look forward to them nonetheless, Alara replied. The glow beneath her skin pulsed once, quickly, like a heartbeat made visible. Humans form emotional attachments before mating, correct? Unlike most rational species who mate for genetic optimization. That's a simplification, Connor began, but generally. An announcement chimed overhead, indicating the formal commencement of the reception. Alara inclined her head slightly. Until tomorrow, Dr. Hayes, she said, her voice maintaining its perfect neutrality despite the betraying fluctuations of light beneath her skin. I anticipate our intellectual exchange will be illuminating for both our species. As she glided away to rejoin her delegation, Connor released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Remember what I said, Wilson murmured. Professional thoughts only. The Virari consider emotional indulgence a sign of evolutionary weakness. Connor nodded, but couldn't help watching as Alara rejoined her companions. Unlike the other Virari whose skin maintained a consistent, muted glow, hers continued to pulse subtly with changing patterns of light, almost as if something beneath her carefully controlled exterior was struggling to break free. Human courtship rituals vary significantly by culture, historical period, and individual preference, Connor explained, advancing to the next holographic display. The lecture hall was filled to capacity, with representatives from 17 different species leaning forward with varying degrees of interest. But most involve some combination of verbal communication, gift exchange, shared experiences, and gradual physical intimacy. His gaze drifted involuntarily to the front row where Alara sat, her posture perfect, silver eyes unblinking. Unlike his first two lectures where she'd attended with other Uvarari delegates, today she was alone. The luminescence beneath her violet skin had been fluctuating steadily throughout his presentation, particularly when he discussed physical aspects of human relationships. This progression of intimacy, from conversation to casual touch to more deliberate forms of physical connection, serves multiple evolutionary functions, Connor continued, forcing himself to look away from her. It allows potential mates to assess compatibility across multiple dimensions, intellectual, emotional, and physical. An insectoid kratee raised a segmented appendage. Query: does physical appearance truly influence human mate selection despite its minimal correlation with genetic quality or reproductive fitness? Connor nodded. It does, though less than in our evolutionary past. Facial symmetry, body proportions, and other visible markers historically served as proxies for health and genetic quality. Inefficient, chittered the kratee. Our queens select drones solely based on pheromone compatibility tests. Different evolutionary paths, Connor acknowledged with a diplomatic smile. Humans evolved as pair-bonding primates with extended child-rearing requirements, making partner compatibility across multiple domains advantageous. Another delegate, a gelatinous morbidian, bubbled a question from the back. Is it accurate that humans experience pleasure from reproductive activities even when conception is not possible or intended? Connor felt heat rising to his face. This lecture on human mating behaviors was proving more challenging than anticipated. Yes, for humans, sexual activity serves both reproductive and social bonding functions. The associated pleasure encourages pair maintenance, which historically benefited offspring survival. Throughout the exchange, he noticed Alara's skin glowing increasingly brighter, the patterns shifting rapidly across her throat and temples. When he advanced to diagrams of human reproductive anatomy, The luminescence intensified so significantly that several other delegates glanced in her direction. Our final topic today is human monogamy versus polyamory, Connor said, grateful to be nearing the end of this particularly awkward session. While many humans form exclusive pair bonds, others maintain multiple simultaneous relationships with the knowledge and consent of all involved parties. At this, Alara raised her hand, the first time she had ever directly participated in one of his lectures. Dr. Hayes, does this mean humans are capable of forming genuine emotional connections with multiple partners simultaneously? Many can, yes, Connor replied, though individual capacity for managing multiple emotional bonds varies considerably. And these emotional connections, they precede mating acts? She pressed, her skin pulsing so vividly now that it cast subtle shadows on the datapad in her lap. Typically, yes, though not universally, Connor answered carefully, aware that the entire room was following their exchange with interest. Human sexuality exists on a spectrum from emotional connection-dependent to connection-independent. The lecture concluded shortly thereafter, but as delegates filed out of the hall, Connor noticed Alara remaining seated, her fingers moving rapidly across her datapad. He busied himself powering down the holographic displays, acutely aware that they were now alone in the large room. Dr. Hayes, she said finally, approaching his podium, I require clarification on aspects of your presentation. Connor looked up, startled by how close she now stood. In the 3 weeks since his arrival at Unity Nexus, he delivered 12 lectures, and Alara had attended every one. Each time, she'd grown slightly more expressive, her skin's luminescence increasingly difficult to control. Today, it ebbed and flowed like bioluminescent tides beneath her violet surface. Of course, senior researcher, he replied, trying to maintain professional composure despite the strange tension crackling between them. What can I clarify? You stated that humans do not universally mate with all compatible partners they encounter, she said, her silver eyes studying his face with unnerving intensity. Yet historical data indicates frequent human hybridization attempts with other species since your expansion into the galaxy. Connor blinked in surprise. There's been significant misunderstanding about that. Humans don't typically seek interspecies reproductive relationships. Those incidents were either misinterpretations of diplomatic overtures or isolated cases. So humans are selective about mating partners even within their own species, she pressed, moving closer still. The air between them seemed charged with invisible energy. Extremely selective, actually, Connor replied, taking a half step back and colliding with the podium. Most humans spend years finding compatible partners. Alara tilted her head, the light beneath her skin pulsing faster. What criteria determine this compatibility beyond reproductive fitness? Emotional resonance, Connor said. Intellectual stimulation. Shared values. Physical attraction. Physical attraction, she repeated, as if testing the phrase. This is your autonomous physiological response to visual and olfactory stimuli from a potential mate. That's a clinical way of putting it, but essentially correct. Alara was silent for a long moment, her skin shifting through patterns of light that Connor had never seen before. Then, with startling suddenness, she stepped forward until barely inches separated them. Do humans truly mate with all species they encounter? She asked, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet retaining its precise modulation. Connor let out a nervous laugh, uncomfortable with her proximity and the direction of the conversation. No, of course not. That's a misconception. Humans are selective about partners of any species, and most human relationships are interspecies. Before he could continue his explanation, Alara leaned in closer still, her silver eyes capturing his. The glow beneath her skin intensified to a brilliance that was almost painful to behold. Then, try me next, she whispered. Connor froze, certain he had misheard or misunderstood. I'm sorry. My research requires experiential data, she continued, her voice maintaining its scientific tone despite the intimate nature of her words. Theory and observation are insufficient. If humans are selective based on compatibility criteria you've outlined, I request evaluation as a potential partner. Connor took another step backwards, his mind racing. Senior researcher Alara, I think there's been a cultural misunderstanding. My lectures are purely academic. I'm not here to Are you claiming I would be an unsuitable mate by human standards? She interrupted, the patterns of light beneath her skin suddenly dimming. Is my species physically incompatible with yours? That's not what Connor began, then stopped, desperately trying to navigate this diplomatic minefield. Your physical form is objectively beautiful by human aesthetic standards, but professional ethics prohibit intimate relationships between delegates. Additionally, I was under the impression that Yvarari consider emotional attachments to be evolutionary regression. At this, something flickered across Alara's face, the first genuine expression he had seen from any Yvarari. It vanished instantly, replaced by her typical mask of neutrality, but not before Connor recognized it as something akin to pain. I have overstepped, she said, her voice suddenly formal as she stepped back. You are correct that such experimentation would violate diplomatic protocols. Alara, Connor said gently, dropping her title. May I ask why you're really interested in human mating behaviors? This seems more personal than academic research. For a long moment, she was silent, the light beneath her skin dimming to its faintest glow. Then, looking directly into his eyes, she said, Meet me at Observation Deck 14 at third rotation. Come alone. Before Connor could respond, she turned and glided from the lecture hall, leaving him staring after her in confusion and unexpected longing. Observation Deck 14 was deserted when Connor arrived, its viewing panels offering an unobstructed vista of the nebula beyond the station. Stars shimmered like scattered diamonds against cosmic dust, their light casting long shadows across the polished floor. He checked the time. Third rotation had begun 5 minutes ago. You came. Alara's voice emerged from the shadows near the secondary viewport. As she stepped into the starlight, Connor noticed immediately that something about her had changed. The formal Yvarari diplomatic attire had been replaced by a simpler garment that draped gracefully over her tall form. More strikingly, she had removed the neural dampener that all Yvarari wore at the base of their skull, a device he'd learned was meant to suppress both telepathic projection and emotional response. I almost didn't, Connor admitted. Ambassador Wilson would consider this a breach of protocol. What I am about to share with you breaches far more than protocol, Alara replied, her luminescence fluctuating with new patterns he hadn't seen before. It could mean exile from my people. Or worse. Connor's scientific curiosity overcame his diplomatic caution. What's going on, Alara? Why the interest in human mating behaviors? She gestured to a recessed seating area, and they sat facing each other, the nebula's glow illuminating half of her features while leaving the rest in shadow. For several moments, she was silent, as if gathering courage. What do you know about Yvarari history? She finally asked. The standard briefing materials, Connor replied. Your species evolved on Ivor Prime, developed telepathic abilities approximately 20,000 years ago, and eventually suppressed emotional responses to prevent telepathic overload. Your society values logic, scientific advancement, and telepathic consensus above all. A sanitized version, Alara said, her voice tinged with something Connor hadn't heard from her before, bitterness. The truth is more complex. We didn't evolve beyond emotions, we surgically and genetically suppressed them. The neural dampeners aren't just for controlling telepathy, they're for controlling us. She leaned forward, the light beneath her skin pulsing with increasing intensity. For generations, we've been told that emotions are primitive evolutionary baggage, dangerous destabilizers that would threaten our telepathic harmony. But recently, some of us have begun experiencing difficulties with suppression. You're developing emotions despite the dampeners? Connor asked, fascinated both as a scientist and on a personal level he wasn't ready to acknowledge. Not developing, reclaiming, Alara corrected. Particularly among my generation. The more we interact with emotional species like humans, the more our natural capacity reasserts itself. She paused, the glow beneath her skin intensifying around her throat and face. I've been experiencing this, awakening more intensely than most. My superiors attribute it to excessive exposure to alien cultures. Connor considered the implications. So your questions about human mating are genuine attempts to understand the connection between emotional bonds and physical intimacy, she finished. Yvarari reproduction has been clinically separated from pair bonding for millennia. We select genetic donors based on compatibility algorithms. Physical contact is minimal and purely functional. And you want something more, Connor said softly, understanding dawning. Alara's skin flared with sudden brightness. I want to understand what it feels like to desire, to connect, to choose based on something other than genetic optimization. She hesitated, then added, when I'm near you, the suppression is hardest to maintain. Your emotional field is unusually vivid. Connor felt heat rise to his face. You can sense my emotions? Even specific ones? Surface emotions only, unless there's physical contact, she explained. During our handshake at the reception, I felt warmth, curiosity, attraction. Her eyes met his. No Ferrari has experienced genuine attraction in thousands of years. Yet I find myself drawn to you in ways that defy rational explanation. The confession hung between them in the starlit darkness. Connor knew he should leave, citing diplomatic protocols, professional ethics, the potential political fallout. Instead, he found himself moving closer. What happens if we touch without the neural dampener? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, she admitted. That's what makes this so dangerous. And so necessary. Slowly, telegraphing his movement to give her time to withdraw, Connor extended his hand palm up between them. Alara stared at it for a long moment, the light beneath her skin rippling in complex patterns. Then, with deliberate grace, she placed her slender hand in his. The connection was immediate and overwhelming. Connor gasped as a flood of foreign sensations cascaded through him, not just emotions but fragments of thoughts, memories, sensory impressions too alien to fully comprehend. Colors he had no names for, sounds beyond human hearing range, the strange double heartbeat rhythm of Ferrari physiology. For Alara, the effect was even more dramatic. Her entire body illuminated with brilliant pulsing light, and a sound escaped her throat, half gasp, half musical note. Her free hand clutched the edge of the seating platform, as if to anchor herself. Are you all right? Connor asked, concerned but unwilling to break the connection between them. I feel, she whispered, wonder spreading across features suddenly alive with expression. Everything at once. Your curiosity, your concern, your desire. Her silver eyes widened. Is this what it's always like for humans? Not this intense, Connor admitted, acutely aware of their joined hands, of the strangely intimate mental connection forming between them. We feel our own emotions, not others. No wonder you create art, music, literature, she said, her voice trembling slightly. How do you function with this constant internal storm? We learn to navigate it, he said. It's not always easy, but those emotions are what make life meaningful for us. With her free hand, Alara reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the contours of his features with scientific precision but unmistakable tenderness. Through their connected hands, Connor could sense her wonder, her fear, and something new blossoming, a fragile emotion that mirrored his own growing feelings. This is what the elders fear, she whispered. This power. This vulnerability. This connection. Connor knew he should pull away. Their contact was crossing every professional boundary he'd established over his career. Yet he couldn't bring himself to break the circuit between them, this unprecedented bridge between their species. They fear it because they've forgotten it, he said softly. But you haven't. I never knew it until now, she corrected, her skin pulsing in rhythm with her double heartbeat. Connor, I must ask something that may seem strange by human standards. After everything that's happened in the last 5 minutes, I doubt anything could surprise me, he replied with a smile. Would you? She hesitated, the light beneath her skin shifting to a deeper hue. Would you be willing to form a temporary pair bond with me? For research purposes, she added quickly, though the emotions flowing through their connected hands belied the purely scientific motivation. Connor's breath caught. Alara, are you asking what I think you're asking? I need to understand the full spectrum of connection between sentient beings, she said, her scientific vocabulary at odds with the emotional undercurrent flowing between them. Physical, emotional, and telepathic communion. With someone I trust. The last word carried weight beyond its simple meaning. Connor could feel it through their connection. For a Ferrari, to trust was rare. To trust an alien species represented something revolutionary. There would be consequences, he warned, though he already knew his answer. For both of us. There already are, she replied, gesturing with her free hand to her brilliantly glowing skin. I cannot return to my quarters in this state. The neural dampener no longer fully suppresses my emotional responses. My colleagues have noticed changes in my behavior patterns. And yet you're willing to risk it? Connor asked. Why? Alara's gaze was steady, her voice certain despite the trembling light beneath her skin. Because evolution demands risk. Because what's happening between us may be more important than either of us understands. As the nebula's light shifted across the observation deck, casting them both in its cosmic glow, Connor made his decision. Slowly, he leaned forward until their foreheads touched, a gesture that among Virari signified the deepest form of trust. Through the contact point, their minds brushed against each other more directly. No words were necessary as understanding flowed between them. Understanding and something far more dangerous, far more beautiful. Then let's discover it together, he whispered. In the 3 weeks that followed, Connor and Alara established a careful routine. By day, they maintained professional distance. The human xenobiologist and the Virari researcher, exchanging formal nods during diplomatic functions. By night, they met in Connor's quarters or abandoned sections of the station, exploring the boundaries of their unprecedented connection. Tonight, they sat cross-legged on the floor of an observation deck in the station's disused eastern arm. Through the viewport, the gas giant below swirled with storms larger than Earth, casting a golden glow across their faces. Alara's violet skin reflected the light, her natural luminescence dimmed to conserve energy. The consortium is growing suspicious, she said, her fingers intertwined with Connor's. Elder Moran questioned me about irregularities in my bioluminescent patterns during this morning's delegation meeting. Connor squeezed her hand gently. What did you tell him? That I've been conducting intensive research into human emotional responses, requiring extended telepathic scanning that occasionally affects my own neural patterns. Her lips curved in what Connor recognized as her attempt at a smile, an expression she'd been practicing. Technically not a lie. Technically, Connor agreed with a genuine smile of his own. Over their weeks together, Alara had made remarkable progress. She could now express a range of emotions both physically and telepathically, though she struggled to maintain them in the presence of other Virari. The genetic suppression programming still exerted significant influence, requiring constant effort to overcome. I've been reviewing the historical records I managed to access, Alara said, her freehand tracing patterns in the air, another new habit she'd developed to help process emotions. Before the suppression, my species lived in telepathic communities where emotional sharing strengthened collective bonds. Our art, music, architecture, all expressed emotional states. Hard to imagine from the Virari I've met, Connor observed. We have forgotten what we lost, she replied softly. The elders believe emotional suppression saved our species from self-destruction. They point to humanity's conflicts as evidence. We're not perfect, Connor acknowledged. But emotions give meaning to existence. Joy, love, wonder, they're worth the risk of pain. Alara turned to face him fully, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight. I have something to show you. A deeper connection, but it requires complete telepathic immersion. It would be intimate beyond what we've shared. Connor felt a flutter of anticipation. Their telepathic connections thus far had been limited, with Alara carefully controlling the depth and duration. Are you sure it's safe? No, she replied honestly. But I need to know if it's possible. She raised her hands to either side of his face, her long fingers gently resting against his temples. Close your eyes, she whispered. Breathe deeply. Imagine opening a door in your mind. Connor complied, focusing on his breathing as he learned during their previous sessions. The familiar gentle pressure of Alara's consciousness touched his mind, but this time, instead of remaining at the periphery, it surged forward like a tide. The observatory disappeared. Connor found himself standing in a landscape unlike anything he'd ever seen. A vast crystal plain beneath twin moons, structures of impossible geometry rising in the distance. The air itself seemed to shimmer with color and light. This is Ivera, Alara's voice echoed in his mind. My homeworld, before the suppression. A figure materialized beside him, Alara, but subtly different. Her skin glowed with complex patterns that shifted with each thought, and her movements flowed with graceful emotion. How are you showing me this? Connor asked without speaking. These events happened centuries ago. Genetic memory, she explained. Our telepathic abilities allow access to ancestral experiences passed through generations. The elders suppress these memories, but they remain within us. The landscape shifted. Connor witnessed Virari dancing beneath crystalline spires, their bodies illuminated with synchronized patterns of light. He felt their joy, their communal bond, emotions so powerful they brought tears to his physical eyes. Then darkness fell. Clinical laboratories replaced the crystal planes. Connor experienced the horror of the first generations to undergo emotional suppression, the sense of loss, of something precious being extinguished, before even the memory of emotion faded. This is what they took from us, Alara's consciousness whispered, entwining more deeply with his own. The mental landscape shifted again, becoming a swirling nebula of shared consciousness. Connor could no longer distinguish where his thoughts ended and Alara's began. He felt her curiosity, her fear, her determination, and beneath it all, a growing emotion she had no name for, directed toward him. This, he thought, recognizing the feeling. Humans call this love. The nebula flared brilliantly at the word, Alara's consciousness embracing the concept with newfound understanding. Through their connection, Connor experienced how she perceived him, his kindness, his patience, his willingness to embrace the unknown. He felt her wonder at human emotional capacity, her admiration for his specific expression of it. And then, more intimately, he felt her desire, not just for knowledge or experiment, but for him specifically. The sensation was unlike human desire, more multidimensional, encompassing mind and body in ways human physiology couldn't process. It was overwhelming, exhilarating, terrifying in its intensity. In the physical world, Alara's body glowed with unprecedented brilliance, bathing the observation deck in violet light. Her forehead pressed against Connor's, their breath mingling as the telepathic connection deepened further. Is this how humans feel when they're intimate? Her thoughts whispered through his. Similar, he responded. But we lack telepathic connection. This is more. Their physical bodies responded to the mental union, moving together instinctively. The boundaries between species blurred as they discovered unexpected compatibilities, not just mental but physical. Alara's luminescence responded to his touch, creating patterns that matched his heartbeat. Her telepathic abilities heightened every sensation, creating feedback loops of pleasure that transcended conventional intimacy. When they finally separated, both physically and mentally, Alara collapsed against him, her normally perfect posture abandoned. Her skin continued to pulse with aftershocks of light, her breathing unsteady. That was. She whispered against his neck, unable to find words adequate to describe the experience. I know, Connor replied simply, holding her close. Through the fading telepathic connection, he could still feel echoes of her emotions, wonder, satisfaction, and a deep contentment unlike anything she'd experienced before. My people were wrong, she said after several minutes of silence. Emotional connection doesn't weaken us. It transforms us. Her fingers traced patterns on his skin. I must show others. The younger generation especially, many are experiencing emotional awakening but hide it out of fear. Connor tensed slightly. That could be dangerous. If the elders discover what we've... A harsh alarm cut through the quiet intimacy of the moment. Red emergency lights activated along the corridor outside the observation deck. Security breach in Eastern Sector, announced the station's automated system. All personnel returned to designated areas immediately. Alara sat up abruptly, her skin dimming to near darkness, a Ferrari fear response Connor had never witnessed before. They know, she whispered. Someone followed us. Connor helped her to her feet, straightening his uniform. We need to separate. If they find us together like this... It's too late, Alara interrupted, her telepathic abilities sensing what Connor couldn't. They're already here. The observation deck door slid open. Elder Morin stood in the entrance, flanked by two Ferrari security officers and Ambassador Wilson. Their expressions, Wilson's openly shocked, the Ferrari's carefully neutral despite the situation, told Connor everything he needed to know. Their secret was exposed. The consequences would reshape both their lives and, potentially, the fragile peace between their species. Unprecedented violation of diplomatic protocol. Ambassador Wilson fumed, pacing the secure conference room where Connor had been confined for the past 6 hours. Intimate contact with a representative of a species with whom we've barely established peace. Do you have any idea what you've done? Connor sat motionless, his mind still reeling from being forcibly separated from Alara. Where is she? What have they done with her? The Ferrari Consortium has removed senior researcher Alara from Unity Nexus, Wilson replied coldly. Their diplomatic shuttle departed 2 hours ago. Connor's heart sank. They've taken her back to their homeworld? You don't understand, she faces exile or worse. Their elders consider emotional expression a form of genetic degradation. That is their internal matter, Wilson replied, though his expression softened slightly. Our concern is preventing this incident from derailing the entire peace process. This isn't just an incident, Connor insisted, standing to face the ambassador. What's happening with Alara, with the younger generation of Uvarari, could transform relations between our species. They're evolving, reclaiming emotional capacity their ancestors engineered away. Wilson's eyebrows rose. Explain. For the next hour, Connor detailed everything Alara had shared, the history of Uvarari emotional suppression, the re-emergence of emotional capacity in younger generations, and the possibility of a new understanding between their species. Even if what you're saying is true, Wilson said when Connor finished, the consortium elders clearly oppose this development. They've issued formal charges against Alara for genetic degradation and species contamination. They're afraid, Connor replied. Afraid of change, of losing control. But there are others like Alara, younger Uvarari, questioning the emotional suppression. This could be our opportunity to establish genuine understanding, not just diplomatic formality. A communications officer interrupted, entering the conference room with a data tablet. Ambassador, urgent transmission from the Uvarari homeworld. They're requesting a station-wide address. Wilson frowned. Put it through to the main screen. The wall display activated, revealing Elder Moran's austere features. The Uvarari elder's skin glowed with perfectly controlled luminescence, betraying no emotion whatsoever. Representatives of Unity Nexus, he began formally. The Uvarari Consortium wishes to address the incident involving senior researcher Alara and human xenobiologist Connor Hayes. Connor leaned forward, searching for any hint of Alara's fate. Senior researcher Alara has been diagnosed with neural pattern degradation resulting from prolonged exposure to human emotional contagion, Moran continued. She will undergo corrective procedures to restore proper Uvarari cognitive functioning. Neural recalibration, Connor whispered in horror. They're going to erase her emotional development. As a precautionary measure, Moran added, all Uvarari personnel under 2 centuries of age will be recalled from Unity Nexus immediately. The susceptibility of younger generations to emotional contamination presents an unacceptable security risk. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the conference room in stunned silence. They're panicking, Connor realized. Alara said many younger Uvarari were experiencing emotional awakening. The elders are trying to isolate them before it spreads. Wilson sighed heavily. Even if you're right, there's nothing we can do. We can't interfere in Uvarari internal affairs without risking open conflict. There might be another way, Connor said slowly, an idea forming. Ambassador, I need access to the station's subspace communication array. Absolutely not, Wilson replied immediately. You've caused enough diplomatic chaos. Please, Connor pressed. Alara showed me something, a telepathic technique used by ancient Uvarari. If I can reach her, encourage her to resist the recalibration. It's too risky. Riskier than allowing the peace process to collapse? Connor challenged. The younger Uvarari are our best hope for lasting understanding between our species. If they're all recalibrated, we'll be back where we started, formal diplomatic relations without genuine connection. Wilson studied him for a long moment before reluctantly nodding. One transmission. Monitored by security. If there's any hint of further diplomatic damage. There won't be, Connor promised. 3 days later, Connor stood beside Ambassador Wilson in Unity Nexus's main docking bay as a Uvarari diplomatic shuttle completed its approach sequence. This is unprecedented, Wilson muttered, adjusting his formal uniform. The consortium hasn't explained why they're sending a new delegation so quickly after recalling their personnel. Connor remained silent, though hope burned within him. After his subspace transmission, a carefully coded message containing emotional resonance patterns he and Alara had shared, he'd received no response. Yet something had clearly changed within the Uvarari power structure. The shuttle docked with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure. The airlock cycled, and the delegation emerged. Connor's breath caught. Leading the group was Alara, her posture as perfect as ever, but her skin glowing with subtle, shifting patterns unlike the uniform luminescence of the older Uvarari who followed her. Ambassador Wilson, she greeted formally. The Uvarari Consortium requests permission to reinstate our delegation to Unity Nexus. Wilson bowed slightly. Permission granted. Senior Researcher Alara. We're surprised by your return. Recent developments within Uvarari society necessitated a reconsideration of our approach to interspecies relations, she replied, her silver eyes briefly meeting Connor's. Through that momentary contact, he sensed a whisper of telepathic communication, a hint of triumph, a victory hard won. What developments? Wilson asked cautiously. The consortium would like to formally announce a change in leadership, Alara stated. Elder Moran and his supporters have stepped down. The governing council is now composed primarily of the generation born within the last century. Connor couldn't contain his surprise. How is that possible? When you left? Your transmission reached me before the recalibration procedure began, Alara explained, her formal tone softening slightly. The emotional resonance patterns triggered a cascading response in my neural network, and through telepathic connection, spread to other younger Virari present for the procedure. You mean? A peaceful revolution, she confirmed. When hundreds of us simultaneously expressed emotional states, the elders could not suppress us all. Many older Virari witnessed the emotional display and experienced, remembering, ancient genetic memories of what our species once was. One of the Virari behind her stepped forward, much younger than any consortium member Connor had previously met. We have come to propose a new form of cultural exchange, he said, his skin glowing with undisguised patterns of light. One that acknowledges the value of emotional intelligence alongside rational thought. Wilson looked stunned. This changes everything about our diplomatic approach. Indeed, Alara agreed. The consortium proposes establishing a permanent cultural exchange program, beginning with a pilot group of 50 young Virari to study human emotional processing firsthand. As the diplomatic discussions continued, Alara managed to maneuver closer to Connor. I received your message, she said softly, pitching her voice below the level of the other conversations. It sustained me during the confrontation. I was afraid I'd never see you again, Connor admitted. The luminescence beneath her skin pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, a synchronization she'd perfected during their time together. The elders underestimated the power of emotional connection. They believed it weakened us, made us vulnerable. A subtle smile curved her lips. Instead, it gave us strength we'd forgotten we possessed. What happens now? Connor asked. Evolution, she replied simply. For both our species. The younger Virari wish to reclaim our emotional heritage without sacrificing rational advancement. Humans might learn from our telepathic connection techniques. Together, we might become more than either species could be alone. She extended her hand, palm up, in the gesture that had begun their journey weeks ago. When Connor placed his hand in hers, the telepathic connection formed instantly, stronger than before, effortlessly bridging the gap between their different neurologies. Through that connection flowed understanding, admiration, and the emotion Alara had finally embraced completely. Love, not just for Connor, but for the potential of what their species might become together. The elders were wrong about one thing above all, she said, both aloud and through their mental link. True evolution isn't about eliminating what makes us vulnerable. It's about finding strength and connection, even across the stars. As their fingers intertwined, Alara's skin illuminated with patterns that matched Connor's heartbeat. Around them, the younger Virari delegates displayed their own unique luminescent patterns, no longer hiding the emotions they had rediscovered. A new chapter was beginning, not just for Connor and Alara, but for both their species. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, united by a connection that transcended biology, bridged worlds, and proved that even across the vast differences of evolution, understanding was possible. Love, it seemed, was the most advanced adaptation of all.